Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. I'm Ron Mackenzie Lafergie. The world can be a pretty scary place. While science continues to help us understand more and more about the universe, there are still many great mysteries out there. One such mystery is that of Cthulhu, the great power first described in Lovecraft's short story, The Call of Cthulhu. But what if this ancient being was not bound to the pages of books, but did in fact exist? How might the world change if this creature made itself known? Let's explore. If you want more What If videos, check out our Biggest What Ifs playlist on the channel. Now get ready, it's time to ask the question, what if Cthulhu was real? Since Cthulhu isn't exactly well known by the everyman, I'll start off with a brief description of the mythos surrounding the creature. It should be noted that Lovecraft originally intended the name to be pronounced closer to Cthulhu, because it originates in an alien language that can't be properly spoken by humans. However, the easier form, Cthulhu, is more prevalent, so that's what I'll be using in this video. Which is great because I haven't spoken alien since high school, so I'm a bit rusty. Cthulhu is believed to have been born on the planet Vorl in the 23rd nebula from Nug and Yeb, before traveling to Earth with his family and shape-shifting worshippers called the Starspawn. Here, great wars were held between his group and other mythical races, eventually giving way to peace as they decided to share the Earth. Cthulhu later began hibernating in the sunken city of R'lyeh, where, according to legend, he remains to this day. However, legend speaks of cults that continue to worship the old god even while he lies dormant. Physically, Cthulhu was described by Lovecraft as, quote, a monster of vaguely anthropoid outline, but with an octopus-like head whose face was a mass of feelers, a scaly, rubbery-looking body, prodigious claws on hind and fore feet, and long, narrow wings behind. It has been described as a hideous combination of a man, an octopus, and a dragon. Generally depicted as being hundreds of meters tall, Cthulhu was seemingly created with the intent of striking fear and disgust into the hearts of men. This proved to be highly relevant in the myths, as it's claimed that merely gazing upon Cthulhu would cause the viewer to go insane. The myths say that Cthulhu will eventually awaken from its slumber and will rise to once again take over the world. So let's imagine a world where this beast existed. How might it differ from the world we know? Well, if Cthulhu remained asleep, nothing much would change. Those who found the creature deep in the ocean would go insane and likely die before even telling others about the find. Even if they made it back to land, their stories wouldn't be believed, due both to the extraordinary claims and, more importantly, their lack of sanity. However, even a dormant Cthulhu certainly isn't impotent. According to legend, Cthulhu continues to influence the world in a few ways. For one, its telepathic abilities allow it to enter the minds of people around the world. Not only that, the followers of Cthulhu are believed to be constantly working to bring about the god's return, often engaging in human sacrifice. However, if Cthulhu were to be awoken, it would be a very different story altogether. If Cthulhu awoke and began roaming the earth, madness would sweep the globe. All who saw the beast would go insane, with the world quickly falling apart. Cthulhu would likely surface in the South Pacific, as that's where R'lyeh is believed to be. He would either travel east towards Chile or west towards New Zealand. When word spread of the mass insanity due to a giant elder god, countries around the world would do whatever possible to take it out, regardless of the collateral damage. Nuking New Zealand, as horrific as it would be far better than allowing the world to fall into madness. Unfortunately, humanity's attacks would likely be ineffective. In most depictions of Cthulhu, it's claimed that it would simply reform after destruction if hit with a nuclear bomb, much like it did in one story after being cut in half. Furthermore, it could be that the Earth would become overrun by the spawn of Cthulhu. It's believed by some that this alien race known for worshipping the Great One was created by Cthulhu himself, and upon awakening, he would once again bring them to life, to act as his foot soldiers and to lead the human slaves. As if the hulking behemoth wasn't enough to deal with, now we'd have terrifying, shape-shifting creatures in the mix. This would make it essentially impossible for humanity to come out on top, or even find a place to hide. All this means that humanity would be more or less powerless to stop Cthulhu, who would take over the Earth, once again reclaiming it for itself and its worshippers. Those humans who survived might be allowed to keep their sanity in return for subservience, but the Earth and humanity as we know it would likely be gone forever. And now we return to our question, what if Cthulhu was real? Well, if it stayed asleep at the bottom of the ocean, the world would be much the same, aside from the odd sacrifice and confusing dream. However, if it was awoken, there's a good chance that humanity would be done for. With little chance of harming the Great One, we would most likely either be destroyed, driven mad, or enslaved. So let's all cross our fingers and hope that this is, in fact, just a myth.
Have you ever woken up in a cold sweat, half remembering a dream you absolutely couldn't explain? Maybe there was an inexplicable landscape full of strange architecture covered in unrecognizable surfaces? Or perhaps there was a monster, a gigantic beast in silhouette, only explainable in segments. If these are familiar experiences, you might have been visited by the depths dweller himself, Cthulhu. Worry not, you won't suffer long. If he's reaching out like that, the end times are nigh anyway. Or maybe it was just a nightmare brought on by bad takeout. Who's to say? Let's rule that out for a moment and consider what the world might be like if the dreamer did indeed exist. Hello fellow friends and philosophers, and welcome back to the most mind-bending channel on YouTube, Life's Biggest Questions. I'm your voice in the void, Keegan Hughes, and today we're going to be considering the following question: what if Cthulhu existed today? Before we begin, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more tentacled terror. Outstanding! Let's get started. Now, Cthulhu is one of the better known figures from H.P. Lovecraft's collective works. In fact, he might be more popular than his creator at this point. While those interested in cosmic horror likely know H.P. quite well at this point, the general media-consuming public likely recognizes the name Cthulhu. Most folks are aware that he's a tentacle-covered giant demigod of sorts, which is mostly right, I suppose. Now, there are plenty of Cthulhu explainer videos out there these days, so I'll trust you to do some digging if you need additional context. For the purposes of this video, I'll trust that most people sort of know about cosmic horror, and even if you don't, I'll drop assorted facts throughout to make sure we're all generally on the same page. So let's ask the big question: what if Cthulhu existed today? It's not too far-fetched to say he likely does. See, Cthulhu was once above the water, roaming the world like any great old one might. However, these days he seems to be slumbering eternal beneath the Pacific, dreaming in his underwater city of Relaya. For argument's sake, we can claim that there isn't a 0% chance that Cthulhu is dwelling in the depths, never to be found by the average human. If we take that at face value, we can say with some degree of confidence that if Cthulhu existed today, not much would change. The world would still turn, people would still live their lives, dogs would still chase squirrels, the works. However, that is the simplest possible answer. It's easy to say that if Cthulhu existed, he would just continue sleeping. But there's a lot more to consider when a great old one exists. See, Cthulhu inspired many devoted followers. So devoted, you might even call them cultists. And these cultists formed groups and congregations and sewing circles, and these folks organized together and formed bigger cults. Cults devoted to worshipping Cthulhu and attempting to bring him out of his eternal slumber. As a great old one, Cthulhu once knew all that was occurring in the universe. He understood things that humans could never hope to understand. The basis of cosmic horror indeed. However, Cthulhu was willing to share some of this knowledge for a price. Before being relegated to the underwater city, he would communicate with chosen people through dreams. Through doing so, he established his cult. Word spread and cells popped up all over the world. It became so prevalent that even when he was trapped under the sea, his worshippers continued to worship. You see, the ocean is deep and vast, which makes it hard for even a godlike creature such as Cthulhu to transmit his messages. The telepathic communication has been weakened, meaning that only rarely does a message make it to the surface. That doesn't slow the cult down one bit, though. The cells of worshippers continue to congregate around the world, best known for their practice of chanting. Over and over again, they will say the ancient and unknowable words: "In his house at Relaya, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming." This can be interpreted in a lot of different ways, but most of the time people assume that it means he's waiting for his followers to wake him up. It's been said, "That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange aeons even death may die." So Cthulhu isn't dead, at least not in any way that matters. And death apparently isn't the end, which allows for a lovely Cthulhu awakening to be in the cards. This quasi-immortality might actually be a draw for many of his worshippers too. If Cthulhu can live forever, why wouldn't he be able to grant that to his followers, right? That might actually be the case if you look at some different accounts of his followers. Human leaders of his cult appear to be immortal in some cases, drawing on dark and arcane powers to extend their life far beyond the span of a regular person. In doing so, they also inspire others to follow Cthulhu with promises of similar power being granted somewhere down the line. Eternal life tends to get a lot of people interested in worship, huh? And it's not just humans that benefit from this either. If you take a trip to the murky depths just outside of Innsmouth, you'll find all sorts of deep ones. These freakish aquatic humanoids also worship Cthulhu, and the biggest and baddest of them seem to live and grow forever. Even after reaching maturity, their size increases. They also tend to come ashore and mate with humans, creating strange halflings equally devoted to the terrifying dreamer. To summarize what we've discussed so far, if Cthulhu existed today, we'd have a lot more cultists and a lot more immortality, and probably some crazy gigantic aquatic beasts. That's pretty fun, right? Of course, these results only happen if he remains asleep at the bottom of the ocean. If he were to awaken, it would be a whole other story. There are a few different ways this could happen too. I think that one that a bunch of people might be familiar with involves a spiteful fat kid and some superhero cosplay.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we are pleased to announce the successful merger of Cthulhu and the King. Cthulhu's track record for complete dominance and interdimensionary rule is without question.
Definitely not canon or anything close to it, but there was a story arc in a season of South Park where an oil drilling company releases Cthulhu for a period of time. Cartman then decides that he can manipulate the Great Old One, as he does with all the other people in his life, and begins waging war on the things he believes are evil. Then Mintberry Crunch comes in and sends Cthulhu back to where he came from. Again, definitely not how it would really play out, but it's an interesting take on how Cthulhu might enter our realm. And it actually does sort of stick to the story from the Call of Cthulhu. In H.P. Lovecraft's tale concerning the Cultic Creeps, a ship full of sailors actually manages to open a portal to the underwater city, so not too far off in terms of the whole summoning bit. And of course, the summoning is just the beginning. Once Cthulhu enters our world, it's all over. Without deep sleep and deeper waters keeping his legendary telepathic powers at bay, Cthulhu would be more powerful than we could ever understand. He'd subjugate Earth in a matter of moments, with members of his cult being rewarded for their loyalty, and heathens being enslaved or killed instantly. It would all be too much for our tiny human brains. Classic cosmic horror, right? The introduction of Cthulhu into our world also implies a whole lot of other cosmic beings as well. Cthulhu is the figurehead in what is known as the Cthulhu mythos, a series of tales by assorted authors about cosmic entities in the same universe as the Great Slumberer. Without getting too deep into it, we'd also likely be introduced to his progeny, Gathanatoa, Yog-Sothoth, Zothamog, and Cthulhu, his mates, Idhya and Kassogtha, his siblings, Hastur, Cathanid, and Nraku, and his ancestors, Yog-Sothoth and Shub-Niggurath. All of these beings come with their own set of troubles. Yog-Sothoth might father another half-cosmic, half-human child, like in the Dunwich Horror. Gathanatoa might freeze some folks like Medusa, but leave their minds to rot in an immobile shell for all of eternity. Maybe Hastur would leave the yellow sign all over for hapless folks to stumble upon and become indoctrinated by. So many opportunities in this mythos, so little hope for humanity. The world would be a much darker, much more mysterious place if Cthulhu existed today. I'm sure plenty of investigative journalists and scholars would try to infiltrate the cults and find more info too. Of course, this would come with its own slew of horrors and misfortunes. How is a writer supposed to explain their encounter with an indescribable being? Maybe we'd get some video footage of true horror. Although who's to say you can even capture any of it on video? And that just about brings us to our conclusion. If Cthulhu existed today, we'd see an uptick in cult activity, maybe even immortality. If he were to awaken, we'd all be screwed, no question about it. There's also a lot of room for other beings from the Cthulhu mythos to appear. All in all, we'd be terrified a whole lot more often. What do you think? Would you join in on the chanting, or would you just run away? Would a Cthulhu-filled world be better or worse than what we have now? Maybe an outside force is just what we need to feel alive again. What's your favorite Lovecraftian horror from the Cthulhu mythos? Make sure you let me know down in the comments.
When poised with a question as difficult as this one, it seems when all is said and done, no one could be sure how things would actually play out. We're asking what would happen if two godly figures went at it with one another. That's like talking two religions and pitting their gods up against each other. Or maybe asking what would happen if two historic warriors from different eras were to fight one another. The amount of variables that factor into answering such a question, including the landscape, amount of followers each god has at their will, strengths and weaknesses of course, would all be of incredible significance. And still, when all is said and done, we may never know for sure how this fight would end. Still, we gotta do our best and dig deep as we ask, what if Cthulhu fought Kassogtha? Make sure to smash that like button and let's get right into this one. Overall, it seems we know a lot more about Cthulhu, the Great Old One, in a death-like slumber at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean than we do Kassogtha, who is referred to as a Lesser Old One. Based on their titles alone, you'd think that Cthulhu would easily be able to destroy the likely weaker, smaller, and less dominant Lesser Old One in Kassogtha. However, it seems that's not the case at all. Before we break down any fight of sorts, we gotta look at their abilities, or at least what we know they're each capable of. It's also incredibly important to mention something about these two, their brother and sister. Now, if that doesn't make things interesting enough, aside from being relatives, these two are husband and wife, and have twins together in Nyarlathotep and Nyarlathotep. See how interesting things are getting now? Pretty wild. Got two parents, brother and sister, fighting with each other, they got twins. Yeah, trying to kill each other, it's great. Alright, so let's talk about Kassogtha first, because there really isn't all that much to say. She's been described as a large mass of tentacles and has been given the nickname the Leviathan of Diseases due to her ability to poison the waters she inhabits. Some sources claim that her tentacles have the ability to extend to great lengths, however no one can determine exactly how far they go, we just know they go far enough. On the flip side, we got Cthulhu, who is arguably one of the most popular, liked, and well-respected creations of Lovecraft. And for good reason. He's horrifying to look at, and that's simply based on the accounts of people who can make out what they see moments before going insane. Just the sight of Cthulhu can drive anyone mad, and given that his appearance is so horrifying and incomprehensible, we may never truly know what he looks like. That being said, pop culture has led many to believe he's a very large, we're talking as big as a mountain, humanoid-like being with tentacles, wings, and dark features. Some have compared him to a dragon, octopus, and human. In regards to abilities, Cthulhu has incredible strength, as well as the ability to endure a lot of damage. Having all the knowledge in the universe, it's not surprising to think, again, Cthulhu would easily win this matchup, knowing every one of Kassogtha's moves before they happen. On top of that, Cthulhu also has a massive cult-like following, which means he would legitimately have an army of thousands, maybe even millions of people to fight alongside him. Yet even with all this in mind, it seems the matchup could go either way, as the two have fought in the past, with Cthulhu barely coming out the victor. In an effort to prove his worth as a mate, the two had clashed where Cthulhu had troubles dealing with Kassogtha's violent nature. Eventually he proved worthy, and as we know, they would have twins. Which also comes into play here, guys. I'm sure the kids wouldn't want their parents fighting, so maybe that also comes into play here. Who knows, maybe they just stop them. I don't know. All in all, even though Cthulhu has technically proven to be stronger or more powerful than Kassogtha in the past, it's very possible that Kassogtha wins a fight against Cthulhu a second time around, simply based on the troubles he had with her the first time. Although she isn't a great old one, it seems her violent nature allows her to possess abilities that make her a tough opponent for anyone. And with this in mind, it seems that if the two of them fought, odds are they may both end up killing each other. Although technically immortal to us human beings, to each other it seems they possess enough power to kill each other, at least when speaking directly of these two. Now, with all that in mind, it's also quite possible some of the more powerful outer gods, including my favorite, Nyarlathotep or maybe Yog-Sothoth, get involved for whatever reason. Naturally, a fight between these two would certainly lead to a lot of death and destruction of us humans, given that Cthulhu is currently under the Pacific Ocean. Him arising in general would be apocalyptic for us, meaning even if this fight happened in space, we would still be severely affected, simply by Cthulhu just coming out of the ground. Now, as always, guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one down below. Who do you guys think will win this fight? Sure, history says something, but if you let the McGregor-Poirier rematch teach you guys anything, it's that sometimes the underdog comes back stronger. Hopefully it leads to a trilogy, because that is what we're all hoping for anyways.
Both Yog-Sothoth and Cthulhu are mythical beings from the work of fiction Cthulhu Mythos by H.P. Lovecraft. They are both extremely powerful and both quite mysterious. One an all-seeing god, another a giant extraterrestrial with psychic powers. But what would happen if both of these beings battled it out for supremacy? Who would win? That's the question we're asking today on Life's Biggest Questions. Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions, the channel that occasionally likes to imagine what would happen if your favorite mythical creatures got in a fight. I'm your host, Charlotte Dobre. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us what topics you would like to see next in the comments down below. Before we can determine the outcome of a fight between Yog-Sothoth and Cthulhu, I'm going to have to briefly explain traits of both of these beings so that we're all on the same page. According to H.P. Lovecraft, the Yog-Sothoth is a powerful cosmic deity whose appearance is a conglomeration of glowing spheres. It is said that even looking at Yog-Sothoth or learning too much about it can drive mere humans to the brink of insanity, which is why physical descriptions of it are limited. Yog-Sothoth is quite possibly one of the most powerful of Lovecraft's deities, sometimes referred to as the Key and the Gate. It is an outer god, meaning it is a god to gods. Yog-Sothoth sees and knows all. It exists and has existed at all points in time in the multiverse. If you wish to please Yog-Sothoth, you would have to either offer it a human sacrifice or eternal servitude. It should also be noted that Yog-Sothoth dwells outside our reality and doesn't obey our laws of physics. For more information on Yog-Sothoth, I highly recommend you check out our video, What If Yog-Sothoth Was Real? Clickable on the screen right now. Now let's move on to Cthulhu, who is likely the most iconic being from the Cthulhu mythos. Cthulhu is the most powerful of the Great Old Ones. For those who are unfamiliar with the term, the Old Ones refers to a group of extraterrestrials that now lie dormant. Cthulhu is the great priest of this race, and he also once ruled the earth. That being said, Cthulhu is a child of gods, not an actual god. According to the Cthulhu mythos, the Great Old Ones are not the most powerful gods in existence. In terms of appearance, Cthulhu is a monster that's a cross between a man, an octopus, and a dragon. He has an octopus-like head, a base made up of scaly feelers, and is hundreds of meters tall. Like Yog-Sothoth, if a human even so much as looked at Cthulhu, they would go insane. Cthulhu also has impressive psychic abilities. He's extremely intelligent, and he also possesses the ability to invade dreams. If you're interested in hearing some more about Cthulhu, I highly recommend you check out our video, What If Cthulhu Was Real? Also clickable on the screen right now. So now that you know a little about each of them, let's explore what would happen if Yog-Sothoth and Cthulhu decided to battle it out. Even though Cthulhu is a very powerful monster, based on his descriptions, he doesn't have godlike strength, unlike Yog-Sothoth, who is said to be all-powerful. Lovecraft did create a hierarchy when it came to his entities. If it were a contest between two earthly beings, it would be somewhat of a fair fight. However, as I stated previously, Yog-Sothoth is an outer god. It dwells outside our reality. It sees everything, past, present, and future, and can also manipulate any place and time that it wishes. To Cthulhu, Yog-Sothoth is God. If Cthulhu ever dared to take on Yog-Sothoth, Yog would know every move Cthulhu would make before he made it. He would know the outcome of the fight, like how he knows how the universe began and how it will end. Only an outer god could defeat another outer god like Yog-Sothoth. The outer gods include both Yog-Sothoth, Nyarlathotep, and Azathoth. They are so powerful that they literally do not care about earthly beings. We are like ants to them. Perhaps if Cthulhu sought the help of Azathoth, who is said to be the most powerful of the outer gods, he could defeat Yog-Sothoth. But that sounds like a topic for another Life's Biggest Questions, and frankly, I'm pretty tired of saying all these weird names. For now, I'm Charlotte Dobre, and you've been watching LBQ.
Hey guys, welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. I'll be your host, Jared Bronstein, and today we'll be talking about one of the greatest battles of all time. Maybe not of all time, but definitely one of the biggest battles on this channel. What if Nyarlathotep fought Cthulhu? Now before we see how this fight would pan out, let's talk about each one of these creatures, or gods, are. What they are capable of, how they behave, and then who would win in a fight between the two. Starting with Nyarlathotep, the outer god who could take the form or shape of pretty much anything and everything. Nyarlathotep also has a ton of other names, such as the Crawling Chaos, Face Eater, Father of All Bats, the Skinless One. Really, I could go on and on. It seems this guy has 20 plus names. Most likely due to the fact that he turns into different types of creatures, or beings, or gods, or whatever you'd call it. Unlike the majority of Lovecraft's other outer gods, or great old ones, Nyarlathotep is quite destructive. Not to say Lovecraft's other creations aren't, but in comparison, Nyarlathotep is one of the worst. I mean, this is in the sense that he has a goal to destroy, whereas the others have the ability, but no real purpose or agenda. Nyarlathotep is known to be a messenger of sorts for the other outer gods and prefers to just spread destruction and madness among his victims rather than just kill him. Another important distinction between Nyarlathotep and Lovecraft's other work, including Cthulhu, Nyarlathotep can walk the earth, speak human languages, and blend into our everyday society. This could certainly work to his advantage, whether he wanted to take over the earth or build an army to help fight Cthulhu. In this case, it'd be the latter. And speaking of Cthulhu, let's talk about him next. Is it even a him? Probably shouldn't assume. Either way, Cthulhu is easily the most popular and well-known creation from Lovecraft. Featured or referenced in comics, video games, TV shows, movies, you name it, Cthulhu has conquered it. So what is Cthulhu and what is it capable of? Well, for starters, Cthulhu is known to have quite a large cult following. That being said, Cthulhu is believed to be in a deep slumber, more specifically a death-like slumber. Although Cthulhu is incredibly powerful, unlike Nyarlathotep, Cthulhu doesn't necessarily set out to destroy, at least while sleeping. Upon Cthulhu's awakening, the plan would be to take over and destroy the Earth. In regards to appearance, Cthulhu is described as a mix of a dragon, octopus, and human, with a massive scaly body and a tentacled head. Some claim Cthulhu also had wings of sorts. However, it's also been stated that Cthulhu's true form is incomprehensible to the human eye. So who knows what Cthulhu really looks like? The version we see is only the version we can perceive Cthulhu as, when in reality, Cthulhu may be much larger or grotesque than meets the eye. Alright, so now that we have some backstory on these two, what happens if they fight each other? Well, there's a few ways to look at this, and unfortunately, I will say now, it's hard to state a clear winner. Let's explore why that is. For starters, Nyarlathotep, if he wanted to, could technically transform into Cthulhu. Nyarlathotep is a master shapeshifter, meaning regardless of Cthulhu's size, Nyarlathotep can always make himself bigger. However, we don't fully understand how powerful Cthulhu really is due to the fact that it's been in a deep slumber under the ocean. Upon awakening, Cthulhu could take over or destroy the world, the same thing Nyarlathotep is set out to do. So clearly both powerful enough gods, or beings, that they could both destroy the Earth. They also have their own armies in a sense. As previously mentioned, Cthulhu has a cult following, the Cult of Cthulhu, real original. Nyarlathotep has the ability to be extremely manipulative and transform into that of a human, so who's to say he couldn't lead the entire human race on a hunt to destroy the evil Cthulhu? See what I'm getting at here? The battle between these two wouldn't be just that. Instead, it'd be the army of Cthulhu, aka his worshippers, going against whoever Nyarlathotep has manipulated into fighting alongside him, or I guess for him. Ultimately, those who were coerced into this war would most certainly be killed by the beings that are Cthulhu and Nyarlathotep. When it came down to the head-to-head battle, it really is tough to dissect who would win the fight and why. Given the circumstances that Nyarlathotep can morph into anyone or anything, I would say he has the advantage. Regardless of Cthulhu's size, Nyarlathotep would definitely morph into something bigger and more powerful. Of course, Cthulhu awakening would most certainly mean the end of the world and human civilization as we know it. If these two were to duke it out, it seems Nyarlathotep would ultimately have the upper hand. But as previously mentioned, between Cthulhu's cult and Nyarlathotep's manipulative ways, I think the battle between these two may start a World War III of sorts. Whoever isn't being controlled by Cthulhu would be controlled by Nyarlathotep, and that would leave two groups fighting on behalf of these gods. When one of the groups perished, the god without any soldiers left, if you'd call them that, would easily kill any human. Ultimately, this battle would see the human race pinned against each other, depending whose war they're fighting. When Cthulhu and Nyarlathotep actually were to come face to face, Nyarlathotep would have the upper hand and most likely destroy Cthulhu. However, Nyarlathotep enjoys destruction and chaos, which could lead to his downfall. Looking at the other side of things, Cthulhu would certainly do everything in its power to kill Nyarlathotep once and for all, whereas Nyarlathotep would most likely try to find ways to torture or prolong the death of Cthulhu. The beautiful thing about Lovecraft's work is that there is so much room for imagination, creativity, and interpretation to come into play. My version of Cthulhu may be different from your version, and the same goes for Nyarlathotep. These fictional creatures are just that, fictional. And in regards to Lovecraft's work, it seems to be quite ambiguous. Now thankfully, the end of the world isn't near, at least that we're aware of, and these two will never get to the point that their battle leads to the destruction of the world and the human race.
Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. I'm Ron McKenzie-LaFurgy. It's that time again. We love to talk about powerful fictional beasts here on LBQ, and from time to time we like to pit them against each other. And today will be a clash of two of the most powerful creatures we've ever touched on, Cthulhu and Yog-Sothoth, the World Serpent. Will Cthulhu wrap the great snake up in a bow, or will the World Serpent gulp Cthulhu down like he's a giant disturbing rat? Let's explore. If you want more What If videos, check out our biggest What Ifs playlist on the channel. Now get ready, it's time to ask the question, what if Cthulhu fought the World Serpent? First of all, if you haven't watched our videos on Cthulhu and the World Serpent, I would advise doing so. It will give you a broader understanding of the two. However, for those who just don't feel like clicking away right now, I'll briefly go over each of our combatants before we try to work out who would come out on top. Starting off with Cthulhu, Cthulhu is the High Priest of the Great Old Ones, an ancient alien civilization. He began hibernating beneath the earth following a great war with the Elder Gods. He is a being of grotesque appearance, so hideous and incomprehensible to humans that one is said to go insane if one gazes upon him. He's an anthropoid creature with a head like an octopus, a mass of tentacles, a scaly, rubbery body, and long, narrow wings. Since Cthulhu has not actually succeeded in rising to the surface in literature, it's difficult to say precisely how powerful he would be. While in his slumber, he is able to enter the dreams of humans and influence them in a number of ways, and given his size, it's clear that he would be rather physically strong. However, given the abilities of other beings who have risen, he would likely be significantly more powerful on the surface. For example, Zoth-Amog is only able to enter dreams while underground, but on the surface, he's able to enter the waking minds of his foes. In this way, Cthulhu's psychic abilities would be even more powerful in this fight than they were in the mythos. Moving on to the World Serpent, Yog-Sothoth is a sea serpent originating in Norse mythology. It's said to encircle Midgard, the name for the earth in Norse mythology, holding its tail in its mouth to complete the ring. In the mythology, it's said that Yog-Sothoth would set off Ragnarok and the end of the world as we know it. Of course, if Yog-Sothoth is large enough to wrap around the world, it is truly a massive beast, significantly larger than Cthulhu. Based on artistic depictions, it seems that it is not particularly thick, but it's said that it is capable of swallowing a god or a giant whole, which is no small feat. It's difficult to determine just how powerful the beast is, since it really only fights against Thor, but it does have deadly venom. However, it is generally considered to be of rather low intelligence, which could hinder it in this fight. So how might this fight go? Well, let's look at how each fighter might defeat their opponent. If we were to imagine how Cthulhu might defeat the World Serpent, we would need to have a good look at his abilities. While Cthulhu is quite powerful, he isn't believed to have godly physical strength, and likely wouldn't be able to defeat the World Serpent using only brawn. That snake is tough. For this reason, he would depend more on his psychic abilities in this fight. Of course, Cthulhu's ability to turn any human insane just by looking at him almost certainly wouldn't work on the World Serpent, but that isn't the only power at his disposal. He's also capable of impressive psychic feats, able to invade dreams and enter the minds of others. Normally, this might not work on such a powerful foe, but considering Jormungandr is generally believed to be of rather low intelligence, it just might be able to be influenced. This way, Cthulhu could cause it to either quit the fight or kill itself, however he saw fit. On the other hand, however, it's possible that the lack of intelligence would work in the World Serpent's favor, since it might not be capable of being convinced of anything. It might also be further protected by its godly ancestry, allowing it to shake off any influence that might take hold. When looking at how the World Serpent might beat Cthulhu, it's significantly more straightforward. As I said, it takes a hell of a lot of power to hurt Cthulhu. Luckily for the World Serpent, it has a heck of a lot of power. With such great mass, it could deal with Cthulhu in a number of ways. It could constrict the Great Old One until he was compressed into a ball. It could use its powerful venom through a series of bites to eventually take Cthulhu down. Heck, it could probably just coil up on top of the Great Old One and win. Since much of Cthulhu's power comes from his psychic abilities, it would be hard-pressed to defend against a physical assault from Jormungandr. Of course, it's important to note that Cthulhu is quite intelligent. There's a chance that even if he was unable to psychically influence the World Serpent, he would be able to trick it into making a fatal error, which Cthulhu could then exploit. However, despite the vast difference in intelligence, the World Serpent is so large and so strong that it would be difficult for Cthulhu to think his way out of danger. Lucky for Cthulhu, there's a chance that he would be able to regenerate. Unluckily, he would probably do so inside the belly of the World Serpent. And now we return to our question, what if Cthulhu fought the World Serpent? Well, it depends. At the end of the day, this fight would come down to whether or not Cthulhu was able to sufficiently influence the World Serpent mentally. If he couldn't, and this came down to a physical bout, the ridiculously enormous size of the World Serpent as well as its toughness and venom would make it no contest. However, if Cthulhu was able to get inside the head of the Great Serpent, he could indeed win the fight, either by just forcing the snake to return to its place around the earth, or if he was feeling particularly spiteful, he might even force it to swallow itself. Thank you for watching Life's Biggest Questions. I hope this was interesting and informative, and maybe even inspired you to look into it further on your own. If you like this video, please thumbs up and subscribe to the channel down below. While you're down there, let me know who you think would win in this fight. Bonus points if you explain why you think that.